Hi, all. Welcome. I wanted to talk about recording bands in the studio and making sure that you have the options of cutting in between takes, no matter what. It can be take 1 or take 10 or take 30. This is what helps me so that I know that I can be free to intercut between any of the takes that I have done with the band. The key to this is the snare drum. The snare drum is really the one aspect within what it is you're doing that allows you to be able to intercut anywhere from a verse to a chorus to in the middle of a verse or chorus or middle eight or whatever, and make sure you can do it without it being the pitch and the sound of the snare being all over the place. What I do before I cut even take 1, and I know the snare sound is cool and everything's tuned great, I will take some recordings of those, some samples of the drummer hitting the snare drum. And I make sure that they're hitting it with the same hand that they're going to be doing the backbeats during the takes, with their left hand with the same intensity. When I get those hits, I'll get like 10 or 20 hits. I'll put those to the side, but I will always keep them there. And here's what I do before every take, is I will make sure to reference that snare hit that I recorded at the very start of the recording with where the snare hits now. And I'll just go back and forth between input to that snare. And I'll say, you're just a little under, bring it up a little bit more, or it's time to change the head, or whatever it is that I need to do to make sure that that snare is absolutely exactly the same or really close to what that snare sounded like just before take 1. That allows me the freedom to do whatever I want and intercut between takes. It's saved me so many times, because a lot of times if you just start recording, and some people will just, after a take or two, they'll just tweak a couple of the lugs on the snare drum up and assume. Don't assume anything, and don't forget about this, because you might have done an earlier take that is just amazing during the middle eight, and you want to use that in a take later, take 10, that the whole take's magical, but you want to use the middle eight from take 1. If the snare is not the same pitch and the same sound, basically, between those two takes, you won't be able to intercut. And it's a real drag to suddenly say, well, we really want to use it, so we're going to use it anyway. So now what I have to do is sample a snare drum to replace, or sample the snare drum from the actual song itself, the actual take itself, and use their snare sound throughout the whole song. And then I've got to use things like use multiple tracks or multiple hits of that snare drum to actually be able to intercut between takes and resample that snare hit. But of course, that's going to be speaking to the room mics differently and the overheads, and it's not as good if you just really stay on the case and make sure that your snare tuning is consistent. The other thing I do is during every take, in case I'm faced with that, even though I've matched these snares as closely as possible, I'll still have them hit 3 or 4 hits before each take, if it's cool, if the band's not on a roll, whatever. Because sometimes what I will do is, when I'm recording a band, they'll be into the first verse, whatever, and I'll just, on the talk back, one more time, and they'll just count it off immediately because they found the fire, they found the flow, and I won't take the time to record a snare hit or whatever because I don't want to slow things down. I'll just go, guys, count it off, go, and they'll go. So whatever it is that's going down, I want to keep the momentum going, and I want to make sure in my mind I know that I have the freedom to use anything I want. Because let's face it, the snare drum is the key defining element within a band, within a song, when you're recording live with musicians that are going to make it sound like you can intercut or you can't. It's the snare drum. So make sure you have the snare happening, make sure it's tuned right, and you really enjoy the freedom of being able to use the powerful editing possibilities that we have now, whether it's tape or in Pro Tools or on your DAW, make sure the snare is happening. Hope that helps, and have an awesome day.